Senator Ted Cruz agrees.
You know, the word says, you shall know them by their fruit. And Ken Paxton is a tireless conservative warrior. Ken Paxton stands and fights, whether it's against Obamacare, whether it's fighting for voter ID, or whether it's fighting to defend our religious liberty. And I'm proud to say Ken Paxton is my friend and fighting hard for the state of Texas.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a tireless conservative warrior, the next Attorney General for the great state of Texas, Senator Ken Paxton.
Selecting me as your nominee for Texas Attorney General. Thank you. You know, I feel great this morning. Last night it was a little bit awkward. I went to a couple of events, and you know, in Texas, Republican politics, we don't have a lot of rules, but there are two new commandments. And the first commandment is you don't want to speak after Senator Cruz. And I had to do that last night. The second commandment is even worse to break, and that is you don't want to speak after Rafael Cruz. I had to do that last night. So I want to tell you a little story that inspired me to service. I grew up in an Air Force family. My father was a B-52 pilot for about 22 years in the Air Force. And one of my first memories, thank you, one of my first memories, most vivid and young memories, I was about 5 years old, and my parents told me that we were moving to upstate New York to live with my grandparents for a year while my dad went to Vietnam. Now, as a 5-year-old, I had no idea what that meant. But I knew that my parents were serious, and I knew that it was a little scary. So we moved in with my grandparents, and I remember the day that we drove out to the airport. It was a cold winter day in upstate New York. And I remember driving out to the airport, and we said our goodbyes to my father. And after we said our goodbyes, we walked up to the top of the airport in Binghamton, New York, and we watched as the men and women walked out onto the tarmac. And I was holding my mother's hand, and she was squeezing it tighter and tighter as my father walked out, and he walked up the steps to the plane. And I'll never forget it. He turned around, he looked at us, he waved at us, he saluted, and he walked onto the plane. And as he did that, as I was holding my mother's hand, I felt drops hitting my hand. And I looked up, and it was my mother's tears. That service, that sacrifice that I saw my parents make over 2 decades, instilled in me the same desire. That's why in 2003, I had the opportunity to go to the Texas House and serve in the first Republican majority since Reconstruction. And as you might imagine, we focused on state issues primarily. However, something bad happened in 2008. You might remember it. Barack Obama was elected president. And suddenly, our focus changed. However, something good happened. We had a man in office who recognized the threat and with courage stood up and fought the federal government. And that man is going to be our next Governor, Greg Abbott. But make no mistake, Texas is under assault. We're under assault economically. We've got the EPA and other government entities coming into our state, trying to regulate and sue our oil and gas industry, our coal production, our fishing, our farming. It's endless. And why is that happening? Because we've been successful. We've implemented lower taxes, less regulation. Compare that to the Democratic states, whether it's New York, Illinois, Michigan, California. High taxes and lots of regulation. That's the difference. Second, we're under assault politically. You well know that if they can move this state into the Democratic column, that they will control the White House, they will control the Senate, and they will control the House. You know, in 1989, I was sitting in a law school class for constitutional law at the University of Virginia, which was founded by Thomas Jefferson. And I was listening to my professor, a liberal professor from Yale, tell us how the Constitution is a living and breathing document that should not be interpreted as the founders meant, but should be interpreted in light of today's cultural norms and values. Shocking. I had one really smart student sitting next to me, and she stood up and said, "What about the 10th Amendment? Why do we never discuss the 10th Amendment?" And he said, this will shock you, he said it's irrelevant. And you know, I thought about it. At that time, the states were not asserting the 10th Amendment. And I'm sitting in front of a Republican audience today, and so I say this with hesitation. My mother always said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Did everybody's mother tell them that? Yeah. So I will say one good thing about Barack Obama. Despite the devastation he's created for our country, despite his horrible foreign policy, despite the fact that he continues to take our liberties and ignore the Constitution, he did motivate Republican attorneys generals throughout the country to reassert the 10th Amendment. Now I know that many of my friends after Obama was elected felt oppressed and depressed. But I want to tell you that we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity in Texas. History creates opportunities for those willing to stand up. Think about our founders. They were up against a military force like none other in the world, and yet, with a ragtag army and limited resources, they persevered and won. Think about the greatest generation in World War II. At the beginning of World War II, we had a relatively small army, smaller than Portugal. And yet, we put together a military that fought on two fronts against two great superpowers. In the midst of dire circumstances, Texas has that same opportunity. Despite Obama's attacks on our liberty, Texas has an opportunity to secure our destiny just as our founding fathers did. The future of this country is on our shoulders, but history is on our side. History tells us over and over that our ideas work. History tells us over and over that Obama's socialism will fail. But make no mistake, no other state is positioned to challenge Obama's competing vision better than this state of Texas. It is up to me, and it is up to each of you, by the strength of our convictions and by the actions that we take to fight to preserve liberty and freedom for our children and for our grandchildren. If we act with courage, and we act on faith in God, just as our founders did, just as the great generation did, and just as my father did, I believe that God will bless Texas, and as a result, bless this entire nation. God bless you, and God bless Texas. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's